You are not weak, you are not unlucky, and you are not behind in life because you lack talent. You are behind because you were taught the wrong rules. From the moment you were young, you were trained to believe a comforting lie, that if you worked hard, stayed honest, showed up for others, and kept your heart open, the world would eventually reward you. That effort leads to success. That kindness creates respect. That transparency builds trust. And for a while, it almost seems true until you look around, until you notice something that doesn't quite add up. The people who give the most are rarely the ones with the most power. The most honest voices are often ignored. The most available people are taken for granted. And the ones who rise, the ones who control rooms without raising their voice, the ones who are listened to without explaining themselves, seem to be playing by an entirely different set of rules. Rules nobody ever taught you. Rules nobody talks about openly. Rules that quietly decide who gets respect, who gets leverage, and who gets replaced. This is the moment most people feel the discomfort, then turn away. They tell themselves the system is unfair, the world is broken, or that power corrupts. And then they return to their lives, still obeying rules that were never designed for them to win. But if you're still here, if something in you feels unsettled instead of offended, then you're ready to see what's actually happening. Because the truth is this: power does not respond to morality. It responds to structure. Human behavior is not driven by what sounds right. It is driven by incentives, scarcity, perception, and timing. And whether you like it or not, these forces are already shaping your relationships, your career, your reputation, and your future. You don't opt out of power dynamics by ignoring them. You just become subject to them. Most people move through life as participants, reacting, explaining, chasing, overgiving, and hoping to be chosen. A few learn to step back, observe the board, and move deliberately. Those people aren't louder. They aren't crueler. They're simply operating with clarity while everyone else is operating on emotion. Today, we're going to talk about those invisible rules. Not the motivational slogans, not the surface-level advice, but the deeper principles that quietly govern human hierarchy. The kind that explain why being liked doesn't protect you, why availability kills value, why silence can be louder than honesty, and why the person who seems calm in chaos is often the one in control. This isn't about becoming manipulative, it's about becoming unplayable. It's not about domination, it's about sovereignty. And it's not about changing who you are, it's about understanding the environment you're already in. Because once you see these rules clearly, you stop blaming yourself for outcomes that were never random. You stop overextending to earn what should have been respected. And you stop confusing goodness with powerlessness. But there is a warning. Once you understand how these dynamics work, you cannot unsee them. You will start noticing patterns in conversations, in readership, in leadership, in yourself. And that awareness comes with a cost. You may feel more alone. You may feel misunderstood, but you will no longer feel confused. So the question is simple. Do you want comfort or do you want clarity? Because the moment you choose clarity, you stop being moved by invisible forces and you start moving with intention. Let's begin. Number one, the invisible rules nobody told you about power. Power is not what you were taught it was. It does not come from being good. It does not come from being right. And it certainly does not come from being sincere. Power comes from understanding how humans actually behave when no one is watching, when incentives are real, and when emotions quietly override ideals. The first invisible rule is this: the world does not reward virtue, it rewards leverage. And most people go their entire lives without realizing the difference. From childhood, you were given a moral operating system, not a strategic one. Be honest, be kind, be helpful, be available. These are not lies, but they are incomplete truths. They only work when you already possess status, security, or authority. Without leverage, these traits do not elevate you. They expose you. In a competitive environment, Morality without power is not respected. It is exploited. Look at the workplace. The person who stays late, answers emails instantly, and says yes to everything believes they are building goodwill. In reality, they are training others to see their time as unlimited and their boundaries as non-existent. Meanwhile, the person who speaks less, chooses their moments, and is selective with their effort is perceived as more valuable, even if their raw output is lower. Not because they are better, but because scarcity signals importance to the human brain. Look at relationships. The one who explains themselves constantly, who reassures, who over-communicates, believes they are creating trust. What they are often creating is predictability, and predictability kills intrigue, desire, and respect. The person who is emotionally stable, not overly reactive and not desperate to be understood, is the one whose presence carries weight. Again, not because they are colder, but because they are not trying to prove their worth. This is uncomfortable because it contradicts what feels fair. We want to believe effort is enough, that being genuine guarantees safety, that if we are good people, the world will meet us halfway. But power does not operate on fairness. It operates on perception and consequence. And the sooner you accept that, the sooner you stop fighting reality and start navigating it. Here is the small but critical lesson of this first rule. Stop asking whether something is morally right or emotionally satisfying. Start asking whether it changes your position. Does it increase your leverage, your optionality, your ability to walk away? If it doesn't, then no amount of good intention will protect you from being overlooked, undervalued, or replaced. This does not mean abandoning your values. It means anchoring them to strength. Kindness backed by leverage is respected. Honesty backed by independence is powerful. Generosity backed by boundaries is magnetic. Without that foundation, even your best traits will be ignored or taken for granted. Once you see this, you begin to notice a pattern. The people who seem calm under pressure are not calmer by nature. They simply know they are not cornered. The people who command attention are not louder. They just don't need it. Power starts long before confrontation. It begins with positioning. And that brings us to the next rule. Because if leverage is the real currency of power, then the fastest way to destroy your leverage is to give yourself away too freely. Number 2, scarcity creates value, availability destroys it. The second rule is simple, brutal, and almost everyone violates it daily. Value is not created by how much you give. It is created by how difficult you are to access. Scarcity is not a marketing trick. It is a biological signal. The human brain is wired to assign higher value to what is limited, protected, and not immediately available. And the moment you become endlessly accessible, you quietly tell the world that you are not rare, not busy, and not essential. Most people believe availability is a virtue. They answer every message instantly. They say yes to every request. They show up early, stay late, and make themselves constantly reachable. They think this builds trust. What it actually builds is entitlement. When your time, attention, and emotional energy are always on tap, people stop appreciating them. They begin to consume you the way they consume utilities. Necessary, useful, but invisible. Watch how this plays out at work. The employee who is always available becomes the default solution to every problem. Not the most respected, the most used. Their workload increases, their leverage decreases, and when they finally say no, the reaction is not gratitude for years of effort, it is irritation, because scarcity was never established. Contrast that with the person who protects their time, who is not always reachable, who chooses where to invest their energy. Their presence feels intentional. Their attention feels earned. And when they speak, people listen, because access to them is not guaranteed. The same dynamic governs attraction and relationships. The person who is always texting, always explaining, always available, slowly erodes their own value. Not because caring is wrong, but because overexposure removes mystery. When someone knows they can have you at any moment, they stop chasing. When they know your attention is limited, they become more attentive. This is not manipulation. It is how desire functions. The mind chases what it might lose. Scarcity does not mean disappearing or playing childish games. It means having boundaries that signal self-respect. It means understanding that your presence has weight, and weight requires restraint. There are different forms of scarcity. Scarcity of time, where you are not endlessly available. Scarcity of attention, where you are fully present but selectively so. And scarcity of emotional access, where not everyone gets full access to your inner world. Each one communicates the same message. What you offer matters. Here is the small lesson of this rule. Do not ask yourself how much more you can give. Ask yourself what deserves your presence. Start protecting small pockets of your time. Delay responses when there is no urgency. Choose where you show up instead of appearing everywhere. Not to punish others, but to honor yourself. The world does not value what is free and unlimited. It values what has a cost. When you do this correctly, something subtle happens. People lean in. Conversations change. Requests become more respectful. Your absence is noticed. Your presence becomes meaningful. You are no longer background noise. You become signal. And once you understand how scarcity creates value, the next question becomes unavoidable. If access to you is limited, then what exactly do you offer when someone earns it? Because scarcity without substance is just emptiness, which brings us to the next rule. Number 3, stop trying to be liked. Start becoming necessary. The third rule is where most people quietly sabotage themselves. They confuse being liked with being safe. They chase approval, harmony, and warmth, believing that if people enjoy them enough, they will be protected. They won't. Likability is fragile. It evaporates the moment conditions change. Necessity does not. Necessity anchors you in place. Being liked makes you pleasant. Being necessary makes you powerful. This distinction explains countless disappointments. In organizations, the most agreeable employee is often the first to be overlooked when budgets tighten. In relationships, the partner who is endlessly accommodating is often the one taken for granted. Approval creates comfort. Necessity creates consequence. When your absence creates a problem, your presence carries weight. Look at how real leverage forms at work. Not from doing more tasks, but from solving problems others cannot. The indispensable person is not the one who volunteers for everything. It is the one who understands the system, who sees patterns, who holds critical context, and who can make decisions when others freeze. Their value is not emotional, it is structural. Remove them and friction appears. Delays appear. Confusion appears. That is necessity. In personal relationships, the same rule applies, but more subtly. People do not stay because someone is endlessly nice. They stay because that person brings clarity, stability, and direction into their life. The one who can ground chaos, who understands without drama, who doesn't collapse under pressure, becomes a reference point, not a crutch, a center. That kind of presence is rare, and rarity creates attachment far more reliably than affection alone. The common mistake is turning necessity into control, hoarding information, creating dependence, making others feel incapable without you. That is not power. That is insecurity wearing strategy. True necessity does not trap. It stabilizes. It elevates. It makes others better while making your role undeniable. Here is the small lesson of this rule. Stop asking yourself whether people like you. Ask whether your removal would be felt. Would something break? Would clarity disappear? Would momentum stall? If the answer is no, then approval is all you have. And approval has no leverage. This does not mean becoming cold or transactional. It means shifting your focus. From being agreeable to being competent. From being pleasing to being effective. From being present everywhere to being critical somewhere. When you do this, respect follows naturally because respect is given to what matters. Once you understand that being liked is optional, but being necessary is protective, another question emerges. If your value lies in what you provide, then how much of that should you reveal? Because the fastest way to weaken necessity is to make yourself completely transparent. And that leads us to the next rule. Number 4, privacy is power. Why silence protects your momentum. The fourth rule is one of the most misunderstood and one of the most costly to ignore. In a world obsessed with transparency, oversharing has been sold as strength. You are encouraged to announce your plans, explain your feelings, broadcast your struggles, and narrate your progress in real time. It feels honest, it feels open, and it quietly drains your power. Privacy is not secrecy, it is containment. It is the discipline of protecting unfinished things. The moment you announce a goal, something dangerous happens. Your mind receives a underscan of reward before the work is done. You get validation without execution, applause without results. The hunger that was supposed to fuel action leaks out through words. This is why so many people talk endlessly about what they are going to do, and so few ever arrive. They satisfy the emotional need too early. There is a second cost, more subtle and more social. When you reveal your intentions, you invite interference. Not always malicious, but disruptive. Doubt disguised as concern. Advice you didn't ask for. Opinions from people who have never built what you are trying to build. Your momentum becomes public property, and public property is slow, noisy, and fragile. Look at how serious builders move. The most effective companies operate in quiet phases. Stealth mode, limited information, controlled messaging. They don't disappear to be mysterious, they disappear to focus. The same principle applies personally. The individual planning a career shift who keeps it private moves faster than the one explaining it at every dinner table. The person rebuilding themselves quietly doesn't have to defend their pace, justify their doubts, or absorb outside fear. The mistake people make is turning silence into performance, withholding just to appear enigmatic. That is still driven by attention. Real privacy is indifferent. It is not about hiding. It is about protecting energy. Not everyone deserves access to your process. Not every thought needs daylight, and not every plan benefits from witnesses. Here is the small lesson of this rule. Share outcomes, not intentions. Share progress only with those who are invested in your growth, not entertained by your story. Let your work mature in silence. When something is strong enough to stand on its own, it does not need explanation. When you begin to practice privacy, something changes internally. You stop seeking permission. You stop negotiating your future with people who are not part of it. Your actions become quieter, but more decisive. Your momentum stops leaking. And this leads to a deeper realization. If silence protects your direction, then emotional restraint protects your position. Because power is not only lost through words, it is lost through overinvestment. That is the next rule. Number 5, emotional asymmetry and the myth of equal investment. The fifth rule dismantles one of the most comforting lies you were ever told. That healthy relationships are built on equal emotional investment. They are not. No relationship in your life has ever been perfectly balanced. And the moment you demand symmetry, you create instability. Power does not live in equality. It lives in centeredness. Every interaction contains an imbalance. One person wants more, cares more, needs more reassurance, or fears loss more deeply. That person is not wrong. They are human, but they are also vulnerable. Because the one who is more emotionally invested is the one who negotiates from weakness. You see this everywhere. In dating, the person constantly checking their phone, rereading messages, searching for signs, is handing control to the other side. They are waiting. The other person, calm and unhurried, is not playing games. They simply have a life that does not collapse around one relationship. And because of that, their attention feels valuable. Their presence feels chosen, not demanded. In professional settings, the same rule applies. The employee desperate for approval, promotion, or security works harder, speaks faster, and over-explains. The one who is prepared to walk away listens more, reacts less, and chooses their words carefully. Negotiations always favor the party with lower emotional attachment to the outcome, not because they care less as people, but because they are not governed by fear. The common mistake is to interpret emotional restraint as coldness. It is not. Emotional asymmetry does not mean shutting down or pretending not to care. It means developing an internal anchor that does not swing wildly with external behavior. It means loving without clinging, engaging without collapsing, staying present without losing your center. Here is the small lesson of this rule. Notice where you are overinvesting, where you are chasing reassurance, or you are trying to stabilize something that is not moving toward you. In those moments, do not push harder. Pause. Pull your energy back into yourself. Let the imbalance surface. The moment you stop compensating, the dynamic reveals itself. When you do this, something uncomfortable but powerful happens. The other side feels the shift. The anxiety transfers. They become curious. They lean in. Not because you manipulated them, but because you stopped overfunctioning. You reclaimed your position. This is the paradox. People are drawn to those who do not need them to feel whole. The moment you become your own reference point, others begin to orbit you naturally. And once you understand how emotional restraint stabilizes power, the next challenge becomes clear. What do you do when a situation must end? A boundary must be enforced, or damage must be done. That is where the next rule comes in. Number 6, clean cuts, not slow bleeds. The 6th rule is the line that separates decisive people from exhausted ones. Most suffering in adult life does not come from events. It comes from delays, from situations that should have ended but didn't, from decisions postponed in the name of kindness, comfort, or hope. This is where hesitation becomes cruelty. Human beings can tolerate pain. What they cannot tolerate is uncertainty. A clear ending shocks, but it heals. An unclear ending lingers, infects, and drains. Yet most people choose the slow bleed. They soften the truth. They keep doors half open. They delay the inevitable because they want to avoid being seen as harsh. What they actually become is weak. You see this in relationships that are already over. Instead of ending things cleanly, one person fades out, stays friends, sends mixed signals, and revisits the connection when loneliness hits. The result is not compassion. It is prolonged confusion, hope without foundation, pain without closure. A clean break would have hurt more in the moment, but far less over time. The same pattern appears in leadership and work. A manager knows someone is not fit for the role, but drags the process out with performance plans, vague feedback, and quiet distancing. The team feels it. The individual feels it. Morale erodes. Trust erodes. All because the leader lacked the courage to cut once and allow recovery to begin. The mistake people make is confusing clarity with brutality. Clarity is not cruel. It is respectful. It treats the other person as capable of handling reality. It does not trap them in ambiguity to protect your image. Clean cuts are not about dominance. They are about responsibility. Here is the small lesson of this rule. When a decision is clear internally, act on it externally. Do not negotiate with decay. Do not drag endings across weeks or months to ease your own guilt. State the truth once, calmly, directly, and without theatrics. Then follow through. Healing requires finality. When you practice this, you gain something rare. People begin to trust your boundaries. They may not like your decisions, but they will respect your consistency. You become someone whose yes means yes, and whose no means no. That reliability is a form of power. And once you understand how decisive endings preserve strength, the next layer of power reveals itself. Because even the right decision can be weakened by poor presentation. Authority is not only about what you do, it is about how you are seen doing it. That is the next rule. Number 7, perception is not superficial, it is strategic. The 7th rule forces you to confront an uncomfortable truth. You are judged before you are understood, not because people are shallow, but because the human mind is fast. It scans for signals, patterns, and shortcuts. And in that first instant, perception becomes reality. Not permanently, but long enough to decide whether you are listened to, trusted, or dismissed. Most people are taught to downplay this. Don't judge a book by its cover. Be authentic. Let your work speak for itself. These ideas sound noble, and they are often fatal, because the world does not reward what is hidden. It rewards what is legible. If your value is invisible, it may as well not exist. Perception is not about deception. It is about translation. It is how you convert your inner competence into something others can recognize without effort. Authority is communicated before it is proven, through posture, through pacing, through restraint, through how little you need to explain yourself. Watch a room when someone powerful enters. They do not rush. They do not oversell. They speak less, and when they do, they pause. Silence becomes a frame that makes their words heavier. Compare that to the person who talks fast, fills gaps, and overjustifies every position. They may be intelligent, but their signal says uncertainty, and uncertainty invites challenge. This plays out everywhere. In meetings, the person who presents one clear point and stops is remembered. The one who presents 10 points and keeps talking is diluted. In public life, the leader who remains composed under pressure is trusted. The one who reacts emotionally, even when justified, loses ground. Calm is read as control. Control is read as power. The common mistake is confusing authenticity with exposure. Being real does not mean revealing everything. Your inner self is not a public resource. It is a private engine. What the world needs is a coherent image, strength, competence, stability. You are not lying when you curate that image. You are communicating strategically. Here is the small lesson of this rule. Become conscious of the signals you send before you speak. Slow down your movements. Reduce unnecessary words. Let silence do some of the work for you. Decide what you want to be known for and remove everything that contradicts it. Perception sharpens when there is less noise. When you take control of how you are seen, something changes. You stop feeling overlooked. You stop needing to convince. Your presence begins to carry momentum on its own. People project authority onto you before you assert it. And once perception is aligned with intent, the final challenge emerges, knowing when to act. Because even the strongest presence loses its edge when it moves at the wrong time. That brings us to the next rule. Number 8, timing is the difference between power and panic. The 8th rule is the one most people underestimate, and the one that ruins more outcomes than incompetence ever could. Timing is not patience as a virtue. It is patience as a weapon. The same action, taken too early, looks desperate. Taken too late, it looks weak. Taken at the right moment, it looks inevitable. Panic moves fast. Power waits. You can feel this difference in your body. Panic tightens the chest, accelerates the breath, and demands relief through action. It sends the text too soon. It accepts the first offer. It explains before being asked. It reacts to provocation instead of observing it. Panic wants closure. Power wants position. Look at negotiation. The side that needs the deal now pays more, concedes more, and talks more. The side that can wait listens, asks fewer questions, and lets silence do the pressure work. Nothing changes on the surface, but underneath, leverage is shifting. Time becomes a filter. The impatient reveal themselves. The disciplined gain information without exposing intent. This applies just as strongly in relationships. The urge to resolve tension immediately feels mature, but it often backfires. When emotions are hot, clarity is low. The person who pauses, who allows distance to cool the moment, regains control of the frame. They are not avoiding the issue. They are choosing the moment when truth can land without being distorted by fear or ego. The mistake people make is confusing waiting with procrastination. Waiting is active. It is observation. It is preparation. Procrastination is avoidance. One sharpens the blade, the other dulls it. Powerful timing is not passive. It is strategic restraint. Here is the small lesson of this rule. When you feel the urge to act immediately, stop. Ask what would happen if you waited. What information might surface? What emotions might settle? What leverage might quietly grow? Very often the best move is not the fastest one. It is the one that arrives when the other side is no longer ready. When you master timing, urgency loses its grip on you. You stop being pulled into other people's chaos. You respond instead of react. And in that space between stimulus and action, power lives. But there is a final truth that must be confronted. Timing, perception, restraint, and leverage are dangerous tools if they are not anchored to self-mastery. Without that anchor, power turns inward and begins to corrode the person holding it. That is where the final rule begins. Number 9, power without self-mastery always turns against you. The final rule is the one almost no one wants to hear, because it removes the fantasy that power alone is enough. It isn't. Power without self-mastery does not make you strong. It makes you unstable. And instability always leaks. Every principle you've heard so far can be misused. Scarcity can become avoidance. Silence can become manipulation. Emotional restraint can turn into emotional shutdown. Clean cuts can harden into cruelty. When that happens, power stops serving you and starts consuming you. You gain control over situations, but lose control over yourself. This is how people with dark strategies destroy their own lives. They win arguments but lose relationships. They command rooms but feel isolated. They stop being reactive but also stop being human. Over time, they begin to see threats everywhere. Every question feels like a challenge. Every closeness feels like weakness. What started as sovereignty becomes paranoia. You see this in leaders who can no longer hear feedback, in partners who confuse distance with dignity, in professionals who protect their image so aggressively that nothing real can touch them. They have leverage, but no peace, control, but no center. Power without self-mastery does not free you. It cages you from the inside. Self-mastery is what keeps power clean. It is the ability to observe your impulses without obeying them, to feel anger without acting from it, to hold restraint without resentment, to walk away not because you are afraid of attachment, but because you respect yourself enough not to bargain with what diminishes you. The difference is subtle but decisive. Strategic restraint says, I choose not to engage. Emotional shutdown says, I refuse to feel. Boundaries say, this is where I end. Manipulation says, I will control where you begin. One builds strength, the other builds emptiness. Here is the small lesson of this final rule. Power is not proven by how much influence you have over others. It is proven by how little you are ruled by your own fear, ego, and insecurity. If your strategies cost you your integrity, your clarity, or your capacity for real connection, then you are not powerful. You are merely armored. When self-mastery anchors power, something rare happens. You become calm without being cold, decisive without being cruel, selective without being arrogant. You no longer need to dominate situations because you are not threatened by them. You move through the world with quiet authority, not because you demand it, but because nothing inside you is scrambling for control. And that completes the framework. Not a set of tricks, not a mask, but a way of moving through life that makes you harder to manipulate, harder to corner, and harder to replace. What comes next is not another rule. It is a choice. Whether you use what you've learned to fortify your inner foundation or to build walls that eventually trap you inside them, that decision determines whether power becomes your tool or your undoing.